Over the long term, money and power are like a two-legged stool. You can balance on them for a while, but eventually you're going to topple over.
Welcome to Thrive on Live. I'm Caroline Modaresi-Tarani. Now, we think the more time we spend at our desks equals greater success. But with that mindset, aren't we only setting ourselves up for burnout? Well, how do we understand, treat and reverse the burnout trend? Well, joining me now to discuss are B. Arthur, founder and CEO of Pretty Padded Room, Dyke Drummond, life and career strategist for physicians, Kristen Talbot, licensed mental health counselor, and career coach Mary Beth D. Smith, lifestyle and wellness educator. So guys, thanks so much for joining me today. It's a really topical conversation, this idea of burnout. Dyke, I want to start with you. What is burnout?
Well, burnout is when you have driven yourself down that career path to the point where it's impacting your own personal quality of life. And in healthcare, because I only work with doctors, in healthcare, it really has a powerful effect on the quality of care a doctor provides and patient satisfaction and all those things. But classically, it's three symptoms: physical exhaustion, compassion fatigue, and being cynical and sarcastic about the people you're meant to serve. And then at some point in time, you say, what's the use? My work isn't even serving any purpose. And those are the classic three big symptoms of burnout. And
that's an interesting thing, this idea of kind of, is what I'm doing serving a sort of purpose? I mean, B, talk to me a little bit about that. You know, why do we get into that trap where we think that more work, more hours spent at work equals greater purpose?
Well, I absolutely think that it's kind of an American phenomenon that we should find fulfillment in our work. Whereas with other cultures, you actually see this with immigrant populations in the state, it's a means to an end. So you're able to separate your personal from your professional identity. Whereas here, I think people are encouraged to be passionate. And not only am I a therapist, so I work with people from all walks of life, but I also have a startup. And you see this especially within the startup community, this idea of working 100 hours a week and, you know, hacking up until 3 in the morning. But the truth is, as the doctor said, there's no really good quality work that's going to come out if you're not at your best, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not healthy, if you're not still enjoying it. You know, engagement is the key to, you know, commitment and seeing your ultimate goal. But I really think there's an issue with kind of separating who you are and what you do.
And, you know, you sound really kind of balanced and you look really well rested to me. And it's like you've got balance down to a fine science, but it wasn't always this way, was it? I mean, tell me a little bit about when you experienced what, you know, Dyke was saying as classified as burnout.
Oh, yeah. So I've been at this for 3+ years. And in my second year, I was still a solo founder and I was working with a team of 10 therapists and all their clients all around the world, as well as the development team in Pakistan. So my hours of waking up and corresponding with them, it was a nightmare and I was totally useless. And the way I got through it was, I'm not ashamed to say this, you know, just because there might be other people who are going through this, but I would switch the day hour to hour from coffee to wine. So I'd have like at 10 a.m. I'd start with coffee, you know, I'd try and wait till noon, but then I'd switch to wine just to calm myself down because, and I think you see this with any client facing role. You can only ingest so much human energy before your body starts to shut down a little bit. Because especially with therapy, you know, you're taking on their problems and their passion. And you do care about your clients, but it's not always totally sustainable. So I finally, you know, started hiring people, so I was able to be effective for them. But yeah, that's very real. That's what happened. Now I'm in California, so I think that also helps a lot.
Well, yeah, that's true. Kristen, what did you think of that?
Oh, well, absolutely. I think what happens is we kind of compare ourselves to our neighbors, to our friends, to the societies or communities that we live in, and measure that as our own success. And I think it's really, really important for us to get very clear on what matters to us personally, professionally, and what are our deal breakers, what are our passions, what are our missions in this life, and forget about what everyone else is doing and not compare ourselves to what they're doing to determine what success means to you. And so when we find ourselves doing that, we tend to get really burnt out and exhausted and not living our own lives. We're living other people's lives.
Well, so tell me about deal breakers. Now, that's interesting that you mentioned that. Give me an example of how you're supposed to find what your deal breakers are so that you can kind of, you know, stop yourself sliding into a burnout mode.
Great question. So I deal with this with my clients all the time. They come to me and they really have no idea what their deal breakers are or what it is that they even want. So, we have to kind of spend some time and think about what is it that's driving me crazy right now at my job? What's burning me out? Is it because I'm micromanaged? Is it because I'm doing work that I just don't love? Is it because I need more freedom, more flexibility? Do I need more sleep? Do I need to be able to turn my phone or my computer off at night, and get a good night's rest and spend time with my family? All of those things. So for us, it's very individual, and you have to really sit down and look at what it means to you.
That's a good point. Yeah, Mary Beth, what do you think about that?
Well, key for me was using a nice little tool of a pie chart to see how I was spending my time. I would get to the end of the day thinking, where did the day go and why am I exhausted? And so I realized that a major project that I was working on that should have just been taking 10 or 15% of my time was actually gobbling up about 40% of my time overall. So being able to find that internal resource to say, is there something here that I can change? And what would it be? I really, in the classic sort of race car mode of burnout, is that you've consumed all of the fuel that you have in the flame out. And rediscovering what some of my own internal resources and know-how were was a great way for me to start coming back.
Mary Beth, how do you, you think that people, how easy, I should say, do you think it is for people that are not necessarily working in their own environments, that maybe they're working in an office? Because I feel like there are two conversations here, right? There's the burnout that we ourselves perpetuate as individuals, and then there's this culture of burnout, the culture of overwork, which we, a lot of us seem to subscribe to. I mean, how do you isolate the one from the other?
Well, one tool that's been valuable to me is that I'm a movement educator. As part of my work, I practice something that's called the Feldenkrais method, which is about awareness. And I became aware that really what was wearing me down was exactly what you just described. In a traditional workplace, there were a number of factors that I felt like were beyond my control. In my own case, I had a close friend who was dying, and my partner was in a grieving process because it was his best friend. So that was going on. There was a personal and professional conflict that I was sort of on the sidelines of, and the two sides of it were trying to pull me in to be on their side, which I found to be tremendously stressful. And then I was coordinating a major learning project for about 25 other people where it seemed like the demands were just incessant. And so that sense of overwhelm, I think even if you're in a situation where a lot of things seem out of control, it was important for me to find something that I could have control over.
Yeah, I mean, Dyke, talk to me a little bit about that, the idea of kind of how overwork and how burnout is linked to control.
Well, most of the time what I find is people are focused on avoiding what they don't want. We're hardwired to do that way down deep in our brains, just like a flatworm is, to avoid danger and things that are threatening. And so we go through our days talking about what we hate, avoiding the things that we don't like. And what I help people do is to make what I call the big 180, because the magical thinking I see is if I can just avoid everything I don't want, I'll get what I want, right? And the answer is no. The only way to get what you want is to focus on what that is and make an action plan to go get there. So I'm always focused on helping people do more of what they want to do. Here's a tip for your office. If you've got a bunch of people that you work with in the office, get together around a cup of coffee and tell everybody what you hate. Tell them the job task that you hate. And what they'll do is they'll take it from you. Oh, I like that. I'll take that. And if you do this once a month for a couple of months, pretty soon nobody in your office is doing anything they hate to do. So one of the things that I do as a coach is just really simple, practical tools to get you turned around from avoiding what you don't want to getting what you want.
So, Dyke, there's a really great comment here from one of our viewers, this boring file clerk, who says, why is there no one in the office whose role it is to monitor the workers' overall work health and give time off for those who show clear signs of burnout? Why do you think that is? That's
a clear and missing piece of quality leadership. In my experience, the best leaders are ones who treat their people like a flock, right? Treat them like the plants in their own personal garden. And I believe that a leader who isn't able to monitor the energy and mental health of the people on the job is missing the boat. And what I can tell you, though, is you're only going to see about 5% of leaders who are aware of what's going on in the workplace and care enough to do anything about it. It's only about 5%. And that's true even in healthcare.
So, I mean, what is the kind of stopping block? What do you think it is, there's kind of the barrier to offices kind of getting on board with this idea? Because surely you would think that, well, happy, healthy workers equals a more productive work environment, which equals, more bottom line if you're going to be, looking at it from a business point of view. Why do you think that there is a disconnect still?
Well, and this is where we come back to our first question, which was, purpose. I think you have to feel a purpose in what you're doing. Everybody in the workplace ought to be aligned in purpose. That's just my bias.
Well, that's a good point. Well, listen, this whole idea of burnout, of course, it's very timely, given the awful accident that we heard about over the weekend involving a truck driver who reportedly hadn't slept in over 24 hours and who crashed and killed comedian Jimmy McNair and injured Tracy Morgan, of course, as well. Now, HuffPost reported that last week that the Senate Appropriations Committee, quote, passed an amendment that would suspend a requirement that truck drivers rest for at least 34 consecutive hours, including 2 nights from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. before beginning their next work week. The so-called restart regulation was among a number of changes that took effect last summer with the aim of reducing driver fatigue. But, it was admonished by some safety experts as well. So, Dyke, what does the Tracy Morgan incident actually highlight about our disregard for prioritizing our health over work demands?
Yeah, burnout is intimately related to quality and safety in healthcare as well as truck drivers. So if you talk about safety, if you talk about quality, if you talk about mental health, it all rolls back to what's the level of burnout in the workplace. And if the leaders don't care enough to take good care of their people, you actually have to legislate it.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about that, Kristen?
I think it's a matter of not realizing how important quality of life is, work-life balance, the costs associated with poor performance. And I think employees have some struggles with pressure and guilt and shame about taking time off, even when they're sick or they really need to or they need to sleep. So I think it is really important that organizations pay attention to those kinds of things and make sure that their employees are taking really good care of their health.
I mean, that's a really good point, this idea of the guilt and the shame that you feel for wanting to take time off. And, apparently women are the worst at this. I've got an article here, this is from Forbes, why millennial women are burning out at work by the age of 30. Why do you think that is? Are we all just guilty, feeling ashamed if we want to take any time off because we're feeling burnt out?
Absolutely. I really think there's this idea that, especially by the age of 30 with millennial women in this generation, this idea of having to prove yourself. And it's at all costs, as cost to your personal health, as a cost to your interpersonal relationships. It's actually like nearing financial burden as one of the #1 reasons of divorce and breakups, just really feeling committed to your work where it's replaceable, whereas those relationships and that time isn't replaceable. I always tell people it's kind of like the example of if you're on a plane, you have to, if those, what are they called? The little air things drop down, the oxygen mask.
Oxygen
you have
masks,
to put it on yourself before you can put it on someone else. You are totally useless to anybody else if your self-care and your priorities aren't where they need to be.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about that, Mary Beth?
That's an image I use frequently with my clients. Fix your own air mask before attempting to assist others. I think there's a big disconnect in our society that we actually have people doing these tasks, like driving trucks, like being air traffic controllers. I remember a year or so ago, there was a big flap because air traffic controllers were taking their break time to nap, and everyone was hugely up in arms. I think there's a body-mind disconnect that human beings have physical needs that have to be taken care of. And that's what I was kind of referring to before when I talked about some element of control. There's some part of your life where you can lower the stimulation, some place where you can do a little bit less to sort of reset this chronic overstimulation and need to jump at every demand that contributes to burnout.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit as well about the reaction that we have to other people when they do admit that they might be burnt out. I mean, Kristen, what do you think? Do you think that we are as forthcoming? Are we there with open arms when people say that there is a problem, or are we really not?
Absolutely. So here's the thing: sometimes our families and our coworkers just don't even get it. They're like, "Well, you just need to suck it up. You need to work harder. You need to do something different. Look, the rest of the world does it this way. And so that's, again, when I talk about deal breakers, they're so personal. And, you know, you have to connect with those people who get it, who understand what you're going through and what you're feeling, and listen to your own voice, listen to your own body, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself and not listening to the other people around you who just don't understand. It's really important to align with those people who understand and support you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a funny thing, isn't it? Because even in the office, you can feel you're doing it yourself sometimes. You say, oh, God, I'm so busy. And, you know, people that congratulate other people almost, it's like a competition. Oh, I'm more busy than you. Oh, no, I'm so busy. And, oh, I only got 4 hours of sleep. Oh, I only got 3 hours of sleep. We make it into this sort of really odd race almost. You know, our obsession with overworking is something that James Surowiecki, and I hope I didn't butcher his name there, but he wrote about it in the New Yorker earlier this year. And James Surowiecki, and he said, quote, 30 years ago, the best paid workers in the US were much less likely to work long days than low paid workers were. By 2006, the best paid were twice as likely to work long hours as the poorly paid, and the trend seems to be accelerating. A 2008 Harvard Business School survey of 1,000 professionals found that 94% worked 50 hours or more a week, and almost half worked in excess of 65 hours a week. Overwork has become a credential of prosperity. B, do you agree with that last statement?
Absolutely. I think people confuse it all the time, but it's really not about activity. I think people confuse busyness with actual productivity. And it's really going back to working smart and not too hard, because it's not just the truck driver. You also see it with chefs. I just saw the chef who died after working 100 hours a week. There's several financial advisors and people in the finance industry who are also just losing their minds. And, you know, men are retiring at 50 nowadays. And it's just, you know, I don't know when it became confused activity for productivity. It's not the same thing. Not even close.
And, you know, the funny thing is that, you know, the United States seems to be kind of moving away from where people are being progressive about this. I have an article here. This is Sweden, who's experimenting with 6-hour work days, you know, and they're seeing that by limiting the work hours per day, per week on net, they're seeing more productivity when it comes to workers. I mean, Dyke, what do you think about that? Do you feel like a 6-hour work day could be on the horizon for the US, or do you think that we've got such a long way to go, you know, kind of culturally and mindset-wise?
Well, and I can only speak for healthcare and specifically for physicians. And what I can tell you is that we're strongly conditioned to be workaholics in our training. So for us, there's a couple of things that cause the energetic drains for burnout. This programming that says, one, the patient comes first, and if that's true, where do I come? I would nominate last, is what most people's subconscious says. And never show weakness. Meaning, you know, if there's somebody to be admitted, you're going to step up and take care of the work. So until we get doctors moving to the team-based care that's going to happen in the future and teach them the leadership skills, delegation skills, and all those kind of things to do team-based care, I can't see any doctor thinking that they're going to do a 6-hour workday or a 4-day work week and things like that and get the job done. It's just not part of the culture from the very first day you enter in medical school. And it's that conditioning that drives the burnout that I see. It's all subconscious, and it works. This same conditioning, patient comes first. Nobody shows you the off switch on that. The patient cannot come first 24 hours a day, or you're going to run yourself into the ground. And the only professions that I've seen that are more conditioned to serve someone other than themselves, the only ones that I've seen that are more conditioned than that than healthcare are law enforcement and military. And that's why you see such huge amounts of burnout there as well.
Wow, that's a really good point. And, you know, I'm really curious, Dyke, like, what would you say to somebody? I mean, this is a comment again from Boring File Clerk, who says, also in a bad economy where most workers are expendable, most people are willing to work more to save their job. Fear more than greed drives most workers. So I'm sure you have clients that come to you and just sort of say, listen, I'm scared of taking my foot off the gas pedal because someone could take my job. Like, you know, we're in a, you know, all we hear is about the economy kind of being a bit shaky still. You know, what do you say to people? What advice do you give to people that have that narrative, that have that argument?
Well, I always try to get them, again, torqued around away from avoiding what you don't want to getting what you want. If you have a job right now, don't quit. That's your bridge. It doesn't get any worse than right now, and begin to create what I call an ideal job description. So you put down everything you would want in your ideal job, and then when you go looking for a new job, you create a Venn diagram. This is this job opportunity. This is my ideal job. What's the overlap? And you're always working to maximize the overlap between your next opportunity and your ideal. But don't quit your job. That was my mistake when I burned out in 1999. I walked away from my medical career, set me up for a whole decade worth of struggle because I didn't have a transition plan. But you can always be working to get more of what you want in your next position, whether or not it's an employed position or whether you're creating it for yourself as an entrepreneur.
That's a great point. Kristen, what do you think about that?
Yes, just to piggyback on that, that's something that I work with my clients on as well, is getting very intentional about what it is that you want in your life, and then start creating plan A, Bs, and Cs and Ds. If you don't have the resources to leave your job right now, stay where you're at, but start planning for the future.
I mean, that's a good point as well, not just having a plan B, but also thinking outside the box. I've got another comment here. This is from Randy W., who says, I've avoided the burnout by making sure that I have a balance of work versus me time. Also, I don't allow anything in regards to work to bother me, especially after seeing a coworker get so stressed that they had a stroke and were demoted the same day that they returned.
She's talking about mindfulness.
She's talking about you. Sorry, so Dyke, say that again.
She's talking about mindfulness. Is that B jumping in here too? Yeah,
Oh
it's
my
like
God, yeah.
we're talking about being present.
Oh my God, sending out the wrong message. I mean, you have to think about it long term and living to work, not working to live.
Right.
That's insane.
Right. Right.
Well, one of the things that we never learn is tactics to deal with stress in the workplace and be able to release it. Mindfulness is being able to be present, let go of anything that came earlier today, anything that's going to happen later on today. You got to be able to release that in the present moment. And all it takes is a single breath. We can do it right now, but that's, again, one of the skills that nobody teaches you along the way.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, we're kind of running out of time, so I just want to make sure that I want to get this kind of piece of advice from all of you, because obviously, you know, you're the experts when it comes to this kind of field. I mean, what's the one thing that people can start doing today to, you know, Dyke, as you were saying, kind of being more mindful, but also to sort of combat the culture of overwork and you know, prevent them from going through that cycle of burnout? Kristen, what's the one thing people should start doing today?
Gosh, well, ideally, it would be great if we could have organizations pay more attention to these kinds of issues. Unfortunately, that, you know, the responsibility really lies with us. So we have to decide and commit to making our lives better and figuring out what that means for us. So identify those deal breakers, identify that life that you really want, and go for it. Figure out how to make it happen, but create a plan and start working with that plan. And connect with those resources and people who support you and will help you achieve those goals.
I think that's a good point as well, surrounding yourself with people that will help bolster you rather than kind of support the bad habits that we all have, the bad behaviors. You know, having friends that will sort of say, oh yeah, I worked till 8 o'clock last night, and then you fall into that awful trap that we were talking about before. B, what do you think?
I would say the main thing is there's several studies that have shown that at least 30 to 50% of the workday is wasted on distracting techniques like getting on Facebook or, you know, trying to book this vacation that you'll never take. So I would say instead of distracting yourself, it helps to detach and actually de-stress. So they've done studies on like your level of attention and how long it can actually last. So instead of just like messing around on Facebook, actually work 45 minutes. And I do this myself. I stop every 45 minutes and I take 15 minutes. You know, you're going to waste that time anyway. So get up, take a walk, literally try and spend less time at your computer because it actually affects the way your mind works. So that's the best life hack I could offer.
That's a good point.
And also just take that vacation. It's
yeah, taking the vacation, I'm totally with you, girl, definitely. Mary Beth, very quickly, we're running out of time, but I'd love to know what your tip is.
I was too burned out to be able to make a plan. And so what I would say is in your me time, find a way to reconnect with something that you love to do that feeds your soul, whether it's writing, whether it's Tai Chi, whether it's Feldenkrais, whether it's playing the piano or going for a walk in nature. Find something that you love to do and start doing it just a little bit every day so that you can recover your sense of self.
And that's, I mean, that's a good point as well. And it's kind of what you were saying as well earlier, Dyke. And actually one of our commenters echoed what you said about mindfulness. Jeremy Simpson says, remind yourself to practice mindfulness, which I think goes back to what you were saying. But
By
guys,
that he means breathe.
Breathing. It seems so obvious, right? We should all be doing more of it. I want to thank you guys so much, Dyke, Kristen, Mary Beth, and B, for joining me today on HuffPost Live. It's great to have you all.
Thanks.
Lovely to be here. Thank you
See
so
you
much.
next time.
And guys, for more information, of course, on burnout, you can check out our resource well below. Stick around. There's more HuffPost Live coming up next.